As part of the Bartlett Development Planning Unit from UCL, we participated in the Co-Learning for Action project, led jointly by DPU, the Sierra Leonean Urban Research Center, Njala University, Urban Africa Risk Knowledge, and the Federation of the Urban and Rural Poor. After 4 months of desk-based research, we conducted 2 weeks of fieldwork in which we carried out around 30 interviews with individuals and small groups and went on 6 transit walks to identify risk hotspots and 20 initiatives designed to support the community. Our research seeks to identify the underlying drivers of environmental and social risks throughout the settlement, taking into particular consideration drivers of environmental degradation, inequitable access to resources, and unclear governance structures. Based on these findings, we collaborated with the community to co-produce strategies designed to structurally disrupt and reduce risk in and around the settlement, with the ultimate aim of creating a safe, hazard-free, and inclusive Dworzack. Our first strategy is designed to improve communication and coordination across the settlement in order to create transparency and accountability within the governance structure. Our second strategy addresses environmental rehabilitation and resource management in Dworzack for the purpose of managing and coordinating urban development in an inclusive and participatory way, ultimately reducing its socio-environmental risks. Before we unpack our strategies, we will provide a brief situational and historical overview of the settlement. Dworzack is situated in the southern hills of Freetown, approximately 5 kilometers from the city center. The topography of the land is hilly and undulating, with houses built on steep slopes alongside overhanging boulders and rocks. The George Brook stream cuts through Dworzack from its southern peak down through the settlement, into central Freetown and out through the settlement of Crew Bay before meeting the ocean. Dworzack's location and topography make it extremely prone to natural flooding during the rainy season. There is limited municipal service provision and only sporadically occurring community-level infrastructure. The unequal distribution of roads, bridges, drainage, electricity, and water points have led to uptake of adaptive behaviors by people coping with varying levels of deprivation. In terms of demographics, Dworzack's population has grown to include residents of 18 different tribes. Tribal affiliations are unrelated to religious beliefs, but almost all residents are religious, identifying as either Christian or Muslim. All groups generally live at peace with one another, scattered throughout the settlement.
After Sierra Leone won its independence in 1961, mass-scale land claiming occurred as people exerted their new freedom from the British. This marked the beginning of land use change in Dworzack. As the population continued to grow and changes in administration influenced social practices, the settlement expanded as land was developed deeper into the hills. One such driver of this came when the APC took power in 1967. After claiming land in the settlement, they parceled it off and rewarded it to civil servants who supported them. Progressive urbanization in the settlement was a direct driver of unregulated deforestation throughout the 1970s and 80s. Trees were cut down to provide timber for sale, to build homes and create space for construction, which destabilized soil stability and permeability. There was a marked increase in water and soil runoff during the rainy season, which aggravated flooding and increased frequency of property damage. Natural resources came under pressure as the growth in population meant that waste was thrown into the stream and open defecation became a norm, leading to waste accumulation and subsequent water contamination. These trends continued through to 1991 when the Civil War broke out. Mass migration to Freetown contributed to an influx of refugees from the provinces, informally claiming land in Dworzack, many of whom permanently established themselves in the community after the war. The presence of rebels played an important role in shaping the development of Dworzack. Out of fear, residents did not leave their homes to dispose of waste or openly defecate in the George Brook stream as they once had, nor did they cut forest trees to sell. One key initiative that came from this time included the establishment of the cluster system in 1996. These clusters, named after nations competing in the World Cup, started as part of the local football league. Since their establishment, cluster division has been used to enhance community mobilization through initiatives like settlement-wide cleaning competitions. Towards the end of the war in 1998, the UNDP, in partnership with the Ministry of Land, created a successful initiative to clean the entirety of George Brook Stream from Crewe Bay all the way up through Dworzack. A bylaw was then created and enforced by the tribal chiefs of Dworzack. Both the presence of the rebels and later youth policing of the stream, including fines for waste dumping, enforced the bylaw up until 2005. During the Ebola crisis of 2014 and 2015, strict bylaws around cleanliness were implemented. The cleanliness measures enforced at this time made significant improvements to the environmental health of the settlement, showing us what can be achieved when bylaws are obeyed. Unfortunately, degrading practices returned once Ebola was eradicated.
Given Dworzack's development history and the fluctuating nature of its environmental governance, we chose to analyse the George Brook Stream as an entry point to understanding the accumulation of different risks within the settlement. As previously stated, the hillside area is prone to natural flooding, which then is exacerbated by various human behaviours. We have recreated a visual depiction of how the stream and the surrounding areas have evolved from 1960s to the present day. Before the expansion of the settlement, the stream was a healthy environment untouched by human processes. Over time, development around the waterway intensified, and as land became scarce, construction densified around the basin. Since the end of the Civil War, rapid haphazard urbanization has picked up momentum, with some houses practically being built in the stream. As people built along the stream, this restricted the space for water to expand and seep into the riverbank. Today, the stream is heavily encroached upon. Deforestation has taken place on a mass scale, and waste is accumulating in waterways, increasing soil instability and boulder falling. If current trends continue, the stream will further deteriorate due to encroachment, waste accumulation, and land instability, extenuating associated risks, including flooding, water contamination, and boulder falling. Looking at densification around George Brook Stream, we see how people have coped with flood risk by building embankments and retaining walls to protect households from flooding. This is done using either boulders, concrete, or mud bricks, depending on what landowners can afford. While embankment serves to protect the immediate area from erosion during flooding, it also narrows the river, creating a funnel that increases water pressure, contributing to the erosion downstream and carrying all sorts of debris, such as waste and boulders, into lower parts of the settlement and city. This kind of construction and subsequent deforestation have led to land instability and higher rates of erosion. Soil permeability has been compromised, increasing soil runoff and contributing to flood risk. This has also contributed to water scarcity as natural springs are disseminated. With this trend of land instability over time, there is a strong concern that the entire settlement is at a higher risk for landslides, particularly as heavy concrete structures become more common. As soil has eroded, boulders have been exposed, which are increasingly likely to fall or be carried by water. Boulders are often large enough to crush houses, with the consequences being felt in other parts of the city, and residents of Crewe Bay experiencing worsening impacts from flooding every year. Waste accumulation is both driven and a driver of increased flooding. There is little incentive for people to use the legal avenues for waste collection, as each bag costs money and has to be carried down the main road for collection. During the rainy season, disposal of waste in the stream is nearly ubiquitous. Residents wait until nightfall and dump it into the stream, which carries it away and allows it to accumulate in other parts of the settlement as well as the city. It then blocks natural and constructed drainage systems, contributing to further flooding when water cannot follow a defined path. This contributes to health problems related to illnesses from contamination, as well as from vector-borne diseases when water cannot drain properly and stagnant water becomes a breeding ground for mosquitoes. During the dry season, most people either dump their waste in the stream or burn it near their property. Both of these responses have negative consequences. Dumping waste can lead to contamination and health problems, whereas burning waste can lead to uncontrollable fires and property damage. Even controlled burning can lead to infrastructure damage.
Because of fire, I don't even pop.
Health problems can arise in the situation as well, if fumes are toxic and frequently inhaled. The rainy season can exacerbate water scarcity through isolation and contamination. Over time, flooding has reached such levels that bridges are overrun and large areas of the community cannot cross main access points. Residents cannot leave their immediate surroundings when water flows up to their home, and they have to spend their time protecting the things and pushing water out. This has a stronger impact upon those living closest to the stream, but can affect large areas of the community if bridges are washed over or collapse under the weight of the water.
When this water falls, it's contaminated.
This contaminated water floods structures and water points, which creates problems for anyone living in these areas. Those who are dependent on contaminated water points for drinking, cooking, and bathing are more vulnerable to health problems if they consume water that isn't clean. The water quality of many water points is determined solely through personal observation, assuming purity by its clarity, smell, and taste. Only a few community water points are sterilized with chlorine.
They are not able to stop them because the people are just coming to...
Because this river is not owned by anybody. You just say it is a river.
While residents are somewhat aware of the displacement relationship between waste accumulation and flooding in other settlements, people don't feel like they have any other option. There is a sense that people would be open to the opportunity, but have little faith in the remaining powers of NGOs and CBO interventions, since external actors are known to leave projects without any monitoring mechanisms. In this vacuum, power structures emerge that put some groups at disproportionate risk. Social exclusion and capitalization of natural resources reinforces inequitable power dynamics when vulnerable people are unable to rise up. This further undermines an already weak governance system where communication channels are limited. This disproportionately affects women and girls who are often responsible for fetching and queuing for water, sometimes late at night.
And during this process, teenagers were pregnant.
When you heard them shouting,
give me water and give you the sex.
From this complex, interdependent system of environmental and social risks, we can predict what the future of Dworzack might look like if nothing is done to disrupt current risk traps. In search of possible entry points for transformative change, our research has identified a historical trend of unplanned and uncontrolled urban development that is underpinned by unclear and inconsistent governance structures. To best understand how the identified risk traps could be disrupted, we invited diverse members of the community to participate in a collaborative strategy building session.